Hi, Wolf 95.
How you doing, man?
I'm good, and you?
Not too bad. I'm sorry I was a couple minutes late, but I had to clean some up right quick.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. So, welcome to the live stream. Welcome to Critical African Thinkers.
Yes, sir, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. This is a place where we talk about ideas, where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain
Hmm.
that which is most factual and logically consistent. So,
Okay.
um, Today, principally, I'm going to be interviewing yourself and Stanley, being African Americans, because I want to understand at least the idea for this stream came about from the discussion we're having on the server about how you know the right gets some things wrong about African Americans, and also how the left gets some things wrong about African Americans. And being an outsider, being someone from Africa, from someone from Nigeria, I'm trying to understand what it is exactly that both sides get wrong about African Americans. Now,
Okay.
the general sense that I get is that the left, or the general narrative that I see, is that the left sort of infantilizes Black people, while the right, it is claimed that they are sort of racist towards Black people. So I want to understand if those things are true, and what other things they get wrong about Black people in terms of their perception of Black people's behavior when it comes to education, when it comes to business, when it comes to family, when it comes to religion, when it comes to just politics, when it comes to everything. What are those things that the right gets wrong about African Americans, or what are those things that the left also gets wrong about African Americans? So, before we continue this conversation, just tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, I grew up in the predominantly like the mo most culture of it, right? I grew up around, the gangbangers. I grew up around the drugs. I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. I was involved in that stuff for a short time. Um, and I've seen all perspectives because I'm mixed three ways. I'm part Native American, part black, and part white. So I've seen perspectives that I think a lot of people don't understand because I've seen the issues that plague the black community, but I've also seen the positives that can be seen from the outside looking in. So I have a unique perspective on it that I think a lot of people will want to hear and a lot of people will enjoy hearing because I'm not biased about it. I call it how it is, and that's what more of us need to do. The problem is though that a lot of people don't truly understand what's going on in the black community. They just think that it's our fault solely about what's going on, which is not the case.
Okay, okay. Oh, wow. You seem to have some hands-on experience on, what
Yes,
it means to.
the
Did you?
typical black culture. Yes.
Oh, good. The typical Black culture. So you grew up in where I will be called. How would they call it in America? Is it the ghettos? Is it the suburbs?
Yeah,
Is
the
it what
ghetto,
would
the
they?
hood, whatever you
The
want to call
hood.
it.
Okay. Okay, the hood was what I was looking at. So you grew up in that environment. So
Yeah,
you understand what it takes to have
yeah,
grown up in that environment. Good, good, good. So I'm sure you would have some very good perspective on this. So
yeah,
in terms of, can you just describe briefly what your experiences were growing up in
yeah.
the hood?
Um, Basically, I mean, it wasn't, poverty is really bad in the hoods because a lot of people rely on government assistance because there's no jobs for African Americans in the hoods. Yes, there's jobs in terms of, minimum wage, but there's not jobs really there to get people out of poverty. So they turn to crime. And the problem with that is it plagues the community further because when the crime rates go up, people are scared to go outside. I mean, you can't even walk down the street anymore in the hoods a lot of times without having a gun because you don't know if you're gonna get robbed, stabbed, shot up, whatever. Because that's just the mentality that's been driven into us. And the only way to fix that is, which we'll get into in a little bit. I've discussed with you on the Discord before, but I think I don't know. Are we getting into the topics yet of like left views versus right, or are you still asking me for background right now?
I'm still asking you about the background. So,
Okay. So yeah, I mean, you got people literally, drugs are a bad problem. You know, you got people slaying out on crack cocaine, people hooked up on heroin. I mean, it's bad. And you know, the drive-bys, the shootings, people robbing, you know, armed robberies, people robbing the grocery stores, robbing the gas stations, beating each other up, gang violence, police brutality is a problem. I'm not going to deny that either. But I think a lot of people are not owning up to accountability to some degree because it's not all just on police, it's not all on the white man. Some of it's us, our fault as well. But the problem I have with people on the right is they seem to think that it's all on us, and that's not true. But
okay.
there's a
So,
lot of problems in the hood that need to be fixed.
mm, so from what you just described, so would I be correct to say that that kind of behavior, people robbing and all that, would I be correct to say that it's simply trying to survive in a tough and a harsh
Yes,
environment?
it's a poverty environment that people have no choice because if they don't rob, steal, do what they got to do, you know, their kids might go hungry or something else, and you know that's why it's a problem, and people's not addressing the problem. That's the problem.
Mm, mm. Okay, so looking at that situation, the right would say something like, pull yourself up the bootstrap. I don't know if
Yeah,
I'm saying that correctly.
yeah. Pull
The right to
yourselves up
say
by the
that.
bootstrap. Yeah.
Yeah. What is wrong with that statement by the right?
Well, what's wrong with that statement is a few things. You know, the black community in the poverty-stricken areas in the hood has some of the highest dropout rates in the country. They don't even finish high school a lot of the times. And then on top of it, you know, the mom and dad household, the nuclear family is highly deconstructed due to black males being the main premise for lockups in the hood. And then after that, you know, you've got welfare queens, you know, women that are incentivized to have kids with dudes they know are no good so they can get welfare government benefits. And this has all, in my opinion, been systemically built to oppress the black community because every part of it is designed to keep us down. It's not solely on the system itself because we are also driving it by continuing to do some of the dumb things we're doing. But there's a lot of problems with it because there's no education. The education is bad unless you get out the hood, and then the mentality of, oh, I got to get out the hood so I can have a better life. That shouldn't be what it is either. Instead of trying to escape the hood, we need to fix the hood because if everybody is leaving the hood is never going to improve. It's never going to get better. So we need to work on what's going on in the hoods and stop just saying, I got to get out of here.
So, so when the right says that, pull yourself up the bootstraps and all that, are you trying to tell me that there is nothing within the powers of these communities? There's nothing that people within these communities can do by themselves to, pull
Yes, there
themselves
is.
that kind of condition?
The one thing we can do right off the bat is immediately start calling out the bad people, the ones that are doing the crimes, because doing that by itself is going to show people because it's unfortunate, but a lot of Americans think we're dumb in the hood. They think we're nothing but gangbangers, drug dealers, thugs. And the stereotype, it's not completely true because not everybody in the hood is like that, but there is things we can do. You know, we can come together instead of, you know, constantly wanting to fight each other and gang banging, you know, the gangs, the different turfs, the sets that run through these hoods. We can stop that stuff. We can do it at any time. But the problem is the education is not there to show kids there's another way besides this system that's been built. If the fathers and mothers had the education to take care of their kids properly and show them there's a different way, I think that would be a big step we could do, and then we can go from there. But it's got to start in the house because these
Okay,
kids
so
grow up with no education.
okay, let's talk about education now. Who is responsible for education in communities, in the black communities, and what is the level of education that is prevalent there? What's the source of funding for the education, and what's the rates of participation in education in the black community, at least where you grew up in?
Yeah. Here, if I remember correctly, granted, it's been a couple years since I graduated, but I believe back in 2014 when I graduated, I believe the dropout rate was like 56% in high school. It might be a little bit less now that there's been a little bit of change, but the problem is a lot of them get in trouble too, right? That's what happens because people sell drugs at school. Then they go to alternative schools, they go to juvenile hall and stuff, and it just slowly, gradually ruins their life because of the criminal mentality. Once you get in trouble once, odds are you're getting in trouble again. That's why there needs to be better systems in place, better funding to these schools. But the problem is we can't get the funding because of the education being so low. How they fund schools is normally based off how the students are doing. The higher the grades they're getting, the more funding that school gets because a lot of people want to go to that school. A lot of kids in the hood, they have the smarts. It's just they don't have the structure around them to get the grades they need to go to good colleges, universities, and get out of the mentality of, I'm no better than what the streets is telling me. Because
So,
one of the prominent things, Kat or Charles, was I'm gonna die for this stuff. Like I'll die for the hood. Like, why is that the mentality? Why isn't it let's rebuild this? That's the mentality, the violent, hostile mentality of I'll die for this.
hmm. So, you mean to say that the black schools or the schools in the black communities are not being funded properly, so the
Yes.
children are not getting quality education?
Yes. That's one of the biggest problems because if you take for example, let's take Richmond High, for example, in California. That school is nowhere near as good as one of these public schools, in rich white neighborhoods. Say, for example, something like whatever high school is in Beverly Hills. For a fact that school is getting way better funding than that school of Richmond over in California. And the reason for that is because the dropout rate is so high that the students aren't getting the education. Therefore, the school's funding is never going to increase because schools are funded by the state, I believe, based off how they perform academically.
So, is this sort of an indictment on the position of the right, which says that African Americans are just not cutting it? They're not doing so well in the schools. They're not as competitive as maybe the Asian or the white kids. Would you say that is an indictment on them, that is because they're not getting proper education, or the structures for education in their communities are not as good? That's why that
Yes,
level of
that's
performance
a
is different.
big part of it because without the funding, they can't hire better teachers. Without better teachers, you can't get quality education to these kids. And then you got the problem as well because these kids already, are in the wrong frame of mind. So on top of that, they go to these schools and they don't care about schools. All they care about is, hanging out with their boys and doing this and that. And then their grades start slumping. And then the parents, ain't keeping an eye on their kids' grades. They're not going to the, teacher conferences. They're not keeping track of their kids, make sure their kids are doing good. And that's why I'm saying it's not solely on the system. The parents got to step up as well and make sure your kid is doing good in school and keep them on the right track because that is the only way you can stop them from becoming another statistic. Because a lot of kids just don't have the mentality to escape that environment without their parents being there. Because when the parents ain't around, statistically saying you are I think it's like 8 times, maybe higher than that, more likely to go to prison than you are to college when your parents ain't in your life.
Okay. So this would be a very good place to bring in Stanley into the conversation. Stanley is going to be my second principal guest for today. So Stanley, Wolf 95 has told us about his background, that he grew up in the hood, so he understands the culture of the hood and all that, and so he can speak from that perspective. Would you mind telling us about your own, your own upbringing and the influences in your environment, Stanley?
Well, I well, I'm quite a bit older than the both of you, but basically, I pretty much came up in a in a Jack and Jill in a Jack and Jill setting. Basically, I kind of had approaching an elite uh, upbringing. you know, I've had friends who lived in the hood, but you know, I don't have that kind of direct experience. Um, However, you know, my father is a retired police officer, and I'm from Savannah, Georgia. So, you know, it's back when I was growing up, it was roughly a 50-50 mix as far as black and white. And, you know, I grew up in a pretty rare circumstance because it was a black suburb. There might have been one or two white families occasionally living there, but it was basically a whole neighborhood of black middle class people. You know, doctors, lawyers, you know, cops. You know, the cops were the poor, the poor people in the community. So, you know, it was kind of a pretty decent upbringing. My parents are still alive. You know, all that stuff.
Mm. So, your sort of upbringing or your sort of experiences growing up is a bit different from that of Wolf 95, who, as I said, grew up in the hood where there was violence, there was crime, there was poverty, and all that. Um, you both are African American men. How do you explain this disparity in the experiences of two African American men living in the same country? How do you explain the disparity in the experiences?
Well, I mean, my parents are both from South Georgia. You know, they're in their low. Let's see, they're right at 80 years old. My mother grew up in Savannah, Jim Crow Savannah. Um, Actually, she went to same high school that Clarence Thomas went to. Um, my father's from Adel, Georgia, which is, you know, that it talk about Jim Crow. They put the crow in Jim Crow. Um, he went into the Air Force right out of right out of high school. My mother was lucky enough to go to Savannah State. She's a retired English teacher. So I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's kind of luck of the draw. You know, my parents, you know, pretty much took up all the opportunities they had, but you know, the roles could easily be reversed.
Okay, so I want to tie your last statement now to a position on the right where some people on the right might say that African Americans are not taking advantage of the opportunities present to them in America. How would you respond to that? Seeing
They've
that
got
seeing
they've got
that
to
your
have the
parents,
opportunities. They've got to have the opportunities to take advantage of them.
but your parents had those opportunities and they made very good use of them.
Right, but I mean, there are a lot of people who don't get those opportunities. You know what? My father tells me stories of he and his brother and his father picking cotton, you know, for money, to make ends meet, you know, down there in South Georgia. And my father, for instance, I've met some of his high school friends. Some of them didn't make it out for one reason or another. I don't know details, but I've met friends of his the same age who probably look 20 years older because they spent time, you know, out in the fields picking cotton or whatever it is they pick. So, um, getting out, it may be a function of, hey, you know, now my grandparents, they were sticklers. You know, you didn't BS around in their house, and it may have been what was expected of him. It could actually be the way he was brought up. You know, it was a foregone conclusion that you're not going to sit here and pick cotton and drink beer in the afternoons. You're going to get out and make something of yourself. You know, those sorts of things have to be instilled. But, you know, I have met some of his friends who didn't make it out for one reason or another.
Okay, now so you have a situation. There are two prevailing conditions here now. You've been dealt a very shitty hand, yet there are still opportunities in the environment. Um, And what I can see from the outcomes of your father and the outcomes of maybe his cares was something your father did or something your grandparents instilled in your father, was more like personal responsibility, taking personal responsibility for your life despite your environment. So in
Well,
that sense,
I don't know if they would have put it. I I don't know back in those days whether personal responsibility was the term. It was probably more like you mess up and I'm going to whip your you know what.
yeah, they may have termed it something different, but it's still the same concept I'm trying to explain here. So in that sense, it seems to me that the personal responsibility has a huge or a larger impact on the outcome of the individual than the hand that they were dealt originally. Would you agree with that?
I think it's a great advantage. It is by no means a magic bullet or silver bullet.
Of course, of course. But don't you think it significantly improves your chances of survival, of being better, of making it, of getting out of that terrible environment?
I think it does. But the one interesting thing, Charles, about even growing up advantaged, you're still one mistake away from having um, the opportunity taken away from you. You know, the cushion for messing up, the buffer is a lot thinner, at least when I was growing up, and definitely back in the Jim Crow days. I mean, the buffer, and I'm not that old. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. The buffer, there wasn't the buffer. I've known plenty of people because I went to a private school. I know plenty of white kids, white classmates who messed up royally, but they could always go work for daddy's business. And that was one thing my father emphasized. You can't fall back on daddy's business. You actually have to, you know, steam independently. You need to make something of yourself. You need to make sure that you're able to take care of yourself. I know plenty of kids, plenty of white kids who had daddy's business to fall back on.
Okay. So I want you to give a critique of the right position of pull yourself up by the bootstrap. What what's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it if you have bootstraps. In my case, I had bootstraps. So there would really be no excuse for me, had I, slouched off and not used the bootstraps I was given. But I don't know that everybody actually has the bootstraps.
But everybody not having a bootstrap, is that a race thing? Is that something that's specific
No,
that
I think it's predominantly a race thing. I think there are more poor or disadvantaged people in the Black community, but I lived for about ten or more years up in Appalachia in Northern Virginia, and believe me, um, poor Appalachia is just you know the hood with fresh air.
Hmm. Okay, let me go over to Wolf now. Wolf, same question to you. What would be your critique of the statement, pull yourself up by the bootstrap?
I
What would
mean,
you see wrong with that statement?
it's how it's given, right? Because on the right, what they'll tell us is, oh, it's the black people's fault that they put themselves in these predicaments because they turn to crime, right? Well, that's the problem, and that's where I see eye to eye with Stanley. If you have the bootstraps, I understand that statement. The problem is the hoods don't have these bootstraps because the entire system in the hood is designed for you to fail. It's not designed for you to succeed. That's why until that changes, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps is kind of a derogatory thing in the hood because it's seen as oh, well, you guys did this shit to yourselves, so you gotta do something about it. Well, they don't have the tools to do something about it because of the Jim Crow days and how they jammed all the poor black people into the ghettos, because that's how it started. And then from there, it's just been systemic over time, and it's just one generation after another. And until the hoods are funded properly and people, start to understand what's truly going on, that's why I don't agree with that in the hood. But if you have the, well, I wouldn't call it privilege, but economic privilege. Like if you grow up in a good household and you got good parents keeping their eyes on you, then yes, that terminology does work. But if you don't have that, it's kind of hard to tell somebody that when they have no infrastructure, no education, and no parental figures keeping an eye on them to make sure they're doing right.
Hmm. Okay. So let's cross over a little bit to the left. At least I think we have said something else, at least something about the right now. So let's talk about the left. Um, when the left says that African Americans, they need to be helped, or I don't know if you've seen that video. I think you posted it on the channel, on Discord channel, where so a bunch of white people were being asked about voting and African Americans, and some of them seem to think that African Americans don't even know how to use the internet. They don't know. They might not have the money to to get a subscription for the internet. Some don't know where the licensing offices are and all that. In that sort of situation, how would you respond to that kind of misconception or infantilization of Black people by the left?
You asking me or you asking Stanley?
Okay, Stanley, you go first.
Okay. Well, two things when I saw that video. And the one thing the video got right is, and I know you're going to love hearing this, but I think the left is worse than the right. Um, you know, um, and there's an analogy that I won't use, but I don't know if being hard on a culture or finding a lot of fault or picking through the shortcomings of a culture is worse than, I mean, to me, it's tantamount to nodding your head and pretending you're listening. That's what the left does.
Mm, okay.
They,
Uh,
they think they're listening, or they think, I mean, it's almost like canned answers. They nod their head, give their canned answer, and then vote for us, and then move on, once they get elected. And the right, and I may be going beyond your question here. Let me know if I'm editorializing, but the right gets one thing right. Um, what is the left really doing for us? I mean,
hmm. Okay. So in that instance, do you think that what the left is doing, do you think is by design, or do they have
I think
some sort of
I think it's ineptitude, and I'm going to sound like a raging far right person, and I'm not, but I actually think it's ineptitude. If you don't
mm,
understand the problem, you can't fix it.
so their attitude is born out of a misconception of the problem, misunderstanding of the problem, rather than being sinister, rather than just feigning to be on your side. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's I don't know if it's sinister or not, but you know how the concept of frenemies, you just kind of pretend that somebody, I mean, it's almost like a high school sort of thing. You pretend to be somebody's friend, but, really you don't care that much about them. It's fashionable to be with this person. It's fashionable to have the black friend, but do you really you know, outside of the appearance, is it really a substantive relationship?
Mm. Okay, so let's go over to Wolf now. Wolf, same question to you.
Yeah.
What do you think of that scenario?
Well, yeah, kind of a backstory on it because I was left at first. I was on the left side, but then I saw the problems with them, so I went to the right side. And then I saw the problems with them, and I just said I'm not going to participate. And I agree with Stanley. The left is more obvious about it. They're more obvious about what they think about us. They make it clear. The right is a little bit better at hiding it, and that is pretty much a true thing. Um, for them to say some
Amen.
of those things is crazy because, for you to think black people are dumb and that they don't have access to the internet and they don't know how to vote and they don't know how to get an ID, that is literally just pure lunacy to me. Like, I have met even some of the kids failing in high school and they know where the DMV is. I mean, they know where this stuff is. And in my eyes, for you to say that to me, what that tells me is you see me as less than you and you want me to vote for you because that's something else Stanley said I agree with. All they care about is our vote. They don't care about fixing anything because they live in these comfortable environments. They don't live in the hoods where people's getting stabbed and shot on a daily basis. That's why a lot of these, I hate to say the term, but white liberals, they won't come to the hood. They know better because they come around talking crazy like that and they're going to leave dead. That's just how it is. Like, it's just, I agree with Stanley. Like, the right, they are better at concealing it though. But I'm sure you're going to get into that next, so I'll stay on the topic. The left just, they play nice, right? They're the ones that say, "Oh, well, I'm not racist because I got a black friend." That's the type of shit that I hear from them. And I don't care what you think about that. That's like, no, bro. If you say stuff like that, you got to be racist. There's no way you can seriously believe that what you just said. So,
Hey,
yeah.
Wow.
hey Charles. um, One thing I want to add though, sometimes I get the impression that, excuse me, sometimes I get the impression that the right is too busy owning the libs to actually be of use to
Hmm.
the black community.
Hmm. So they are too busy trying to
Own the libs.
confront confront the left, trying to be reactionary. Are you saying that they are more reactionary than proactive?
No, you have you heard the term own the libs?
Yeah, yeah, I have.
I think that they're so busy trying to prove and own the libs, trying to defeat the quote agenda, trying to keep or hold power that they're I think the right is more interested in power than they are in really helping people in general and black people specifically.
Hmm.
That's just my impression.
So you believe that they really don't care. They genuinely do not care.
I'm not going to say they're bad people. I'm saying that they seem more fixated on gaining and maintaining power. And if they help people along the way, awesome. But if they don't, power is the is the is the real goal.
But when you look at the way the left genuflects to black people when it comes to elections, wouldn't you think that it is that the left that is more interested in power than the right?
You know what? I think you make a point. I think that the left is interested in power, but not enough to actually be of benefit. The one thing that the right does get right is that Black people have, I think we may have learned in 2020 that we actually do have some modicum of power under the right conditions. And maybe we can learn from that. But up till 2020, the Democrats have taken us for granted. And I think Joe Biden is like the living example of that. You ain't Black? Really? Well,
Yeah.
I would have responded, well, you know what? We ain't Democrats anymore.
I agree,
So,
Sam.
so what happened? What happened if that statement, it was obviously very insulting, even to us that are not African American.
It's not just insulting, it's arrogant. And quite frankly, if it had been any other candidate than Trump, you could have marked that moment that Joe Biden lost himself the election. Given any other circumstances, Joe Biden would have been toast.
Mm,
You would have seen Candace Owens's Blexit.
mm. So it was mainly the Trump factor. It was just that black people despised Trump so much that they were
Well,
ready to
I
stomach
don't.
that insult. Um,
I
to
wouldn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't say despise. That's too strong a word. How about fear? Fear what could happen.
Okay, Wolf, comment on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that because political wise, the way I saw it in 2016, I mean, I did vote for Trump. I'm not gonna lie about it because I knew what Hillary was about. I mean, she said some off the wall stuff too. Like, yeah, she eats hot sauce because she knows black people like it. Like, that's when she said that, I was like, yeah, that's what? She's like, well, as long as it gets your vote, right? That's what matters.
Oh,
I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, don't come in here trying to play black culture thinking you're gonna get us. Nah. But in 2020, I didn't vote because I saw who Trump really was. And then I saw Joe Biden and I'm like, oh my God. Like we're picking between a narcissistic lunatic and then the other guy is a complete, I hate to say the word, but KKK supporting racist. Yeah, you know what? And I mean, Joe Biden saying that, that to me, what that comes from, I mean, I've kind of explained it before, that slave master mentality. I mean, how you gonna tell black people if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, you ain't black? Like, what that tells me is you think we're dumb enough to still not think for ourselves. I mean, and that wasn't the only thing. Black people ain't diverse. This and that.
and
It's crazy.
and I hate to make a weird little curveball here. And then someone has the nerve to ask, "Is America a racist country?" Well, there's some things that would make you wonder what the answer really is. You
Yeah,
ain't Black?
yeah, for sure. And
Mm.
that's the president, man. Like that's not just some guy
Yeah,
on the street. That is the
exactly.
president of the country, man.
So if that is the case, why still go ahead to vote for him? Why did black people still overwhelmingly vote for Joe Biden?
Well, besides the buyer's remorse, what was the alternative?
Hmm. So was Trump that bad for the black community that they couldn't
Well,
just stomach him being there, and they took all that from Joe Biden, who Wolf has almost called a KKK supporter. I think that should be a very strong point for black people. I mean, if someone has ties with the KKK, alleged ties with the KKK, wouldn't that be a huge turn off for black people? So what's going
well,
on there?
well, Charles, it just so happened, to use a CRT term, it was interest convergence. Not only was it in black people's interest that Trump not be reelected, it was in America's interest.
Mm,
I'm not being hyperbolic.
mm.
I think that I think that Biden was just the lesser of two evils. It's the only reason he won, and actually, he won by a larger margin than I thought he would.
Mm. So Wolf 95, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, because see, I thought that was right too. It was hard for me because, I saw the first 4 years of Trump and I was like, oh my God, I'm not voting for this dude ever again. But then I saw Joe Biden and I was like, what kind of damage is this man gonna do? So it was like, do I want to get blown up or do I want to get shot? That's kind of the way I saw it. Like, and I hate to say it, and some of your viewers might. I do agree with Stanley. Like after seeing, because Trump, he played his narrative, he played it well, but he really, the only thing I will give him credit for was the HBCU funding. That is something I was proud of him that he did that, because HBCUs are good for the black community. But really, other than that, he didn't do much of anything to help the black community. It was to cater to
Well,
his
he did.
base,
He
etc.
he did the prison reform, though, right?
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah, that was something else. But
So I mean, he
his
wasn't 100% bad. He was only
yeah,
98%. He got
yeah,
2% right.
yeah. But like, if he would have done more for the black community, and he wouldn't have been so just narcissistic about it, I do think he would have got the black vote again. But he didn't. He didn't pay attention to that. Like last minute, he started trying to care, right? Like, signing these presidential pardons for like the rapper Lil Wayne and stuff, trying to be like, oh, y'all see, I'm not racist after all. Well, why didn't you do that in the first 3-4 years, man? Like, it's almost like you trying to hurry up and get it out the door real quick. Like, see, huh? I'm not racist
Oh,
after all. But then you look at his history,
well,
like, it's crazy.
you know what? I honestly think, and I'm, kind of a centrist. But if the
Yeah,
Republicans were really smart and they could pull their heads out of their MAGAs, um, I now, you would have to talk to other people because this is just my personal feeling. But I think that this could be a crossroads for attracting, specifically African American voters. I, it, regardless of the Supreme Court and all these things, um, if they could get themselves out of their MAGA mode, um, I sense that there's some disappointment in the Black community with Biden.
big time
I don't
disappointment.
know. How do you feel, Wolf?
Oh man, the people I grew up around, they are pissed, and I mean they are pissed because what did Biden do? Yeah, I promise y'all, we're gonna get the racism under control. Well, and see, this is something I want to cue Stanley, and this was something that was, kind of ticking me off when I watched the debates. They kept going after Trump about white supremacy. Well, Joe Biden's taking pictures with Robert Byrd, a grand wizard of the KKK. Why don't you ask this man not to denounce white supremacy? Why not? Like,
Well, now Robert Byrd actually did do a mea culpa. This might have even been before you were born. This
yeah,
was years ago. Robert Byrd did his version. He did the Strom Thurmond version of "Hey, I Was Wrong" or the Lester Maddox, not Lester Maddox. Who's the governor of Alabama? McGovern, not McGovern. I can't remember his name now, but he kind of did, a George Bush, "Hey, we're sorry for slavery" sort of apology. So
yeah, and I'll give him that.
he did the best he could.
But I still think Joe Biden should have denounced it because,
Yeah.
it's this dude, like, bro, you supported segregation. Like, you was backing James Eastland. I mean, he was backing dudes that were calling black people the N-word and that they're degenerates and they're nothing but criminals and they're inferior race. Like, no, bro. Like, I'm sorry. You need to tell me on camera that you are not racist anymore, because that's crazy. Like, talking about black people gonna beat your mom over the head with a lead pipe, they're gonna shoot your mother and rob you. Like, nah. I just don't understand
So,
why that he would never denounce white supremacy. If Trump was gonna do it, call it both ways. Joe Biden, you do the same thing.
Yeah.
so when we look at the family structure in the Black community, the right will say that one of the reasons why you're having so much dysfunction in the Black community is as a result of single motherhood and all that. That basically the government has made it such that women are becoming married to the government, and they're kicking the men out of the houses, and that has led to a lot of problems for the Black community. What would be your response to that? Are they right in that sense?
Yeah, go ahead, Stan. You go ahead.
Can you do me a favor? Repeat that question.
Okay, so the question is, looking at the structure of the Black family, um, the right would say that the reason why there is so much dysfunction in the Black community is because the government has incentivized the women to be married to them without having a male in the house. And somewhat you can hear Candace Owens making that point a lot. Uh, and
Okay.
somehow, because of the absence of fathers in the household, it has led to so many pathologies. So how would you respond to that position by the right? It is basically government programs that has resulted in the decimation of the Black family and the attendant problems that we see.
Man, I have about 1,000 facets to this answer. I would say that they're they are 100% right that an intact family is going to result in better child rearing. However, this is and has been a generational problem. It is not something that you can fix with a government program. And I'm not sure that it ever was. I'm not real familiar with how conditions were back in the 60s and pre 60s. You hear stories about how great it was and how marriage rates were higher and all that stuff. I don't know that I even trust statistics, the data pre 1965, to be honest with you. But yes, it is what it is. We have a single motherhood problem. Pontificating isn't going to help. Now, as to the government basically being the cause of single motherhood, I don't think it was the cause, and I'm really not comfortable saying that it is allowing that to perpetuate. I know I'm not an expert, and I'm real uncomfortable saying yay or nay. But if the government is basically enabling this and not fixing it, then how is it not intentional? And
Hmm.
I think Wolf, you kind of intimated that, didn't you? That
Yeah.
don't let me put words in your mouth, but I kind of got the impression that um, if this is the truth that the government is facilitating it, how can it not be intentional?
No, I mean, you're
Hmm.
right. You're right 100%. Because see, that's what's happened. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Because I agree with you as well. I don't trust all the stats pre-60s, because the blacks still didn't really have a foothold that they have now, to where it's got to be more equality based. But it's been government incentivized, in my opinion, because the single mother rate in the black community is astronomically higher than even the white
Right.
community, and they like 60% of the population. Like, it's because of the incentives for it, and that's the problem. Is, that's what the government has done. They've stepped in and said, hey, you don't need the man anymore. Not to call it out, but I'm glad Stanley's on my side with this. That's why I don't rock with Black
Well,
Lives Matter.
I have to defer to you because I really don't know.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that, I mean, I do know that, if you have three kids, you're going to make more money than if you have one kid.
hmm
So is that what you mean by by facilitating it or perpetuating it?
Yeah, because see, like I'll take my home state for example. Back in Virginia, when I was still there, there's a law in place that after a man has so many kids, that he no longer is responsible for child support.
You mean by other women?
Yes. If he has, I believe it's more than 12
Really?
kids. After about 12 kids, by law, you can't get him for child support anymore because in their eyes, he's not able to pay it. So if
Well,
you
how was
perpetuate
he
that into
able
the
to
black
create?
community, that's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, you got 12 different baby mamas. I mean, that's what I'm saying because these women hook up, and I hate to say this about my damn people, but a lot of these dudes is dumb. They ain't no good hardworking man by any means. And because that, they go to jail and then the baby mama gets stuck and the government steps in. And then once the government steps in, she don't need him anymore and she goes to the next guy. And then it just carries on and on and on. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Economically, these women can live better if the government steps in than they can trying to get a job and work their way out because the jobs are not there in the hoods. Most of the jobs are minimum wage, retail, gas station attendant type of stuff. There's no Gucci stores, none of that stuff.
Mm. So on the left would say that the reason for the breakdown of the black family is because of mass incarceration, the war on drugs, and all that stuff. That you can't really blame it on government assistance. That this government assistance should continue. How would you react to that, Stanley?
How can you stop in the middle of the stream? I mean, what choice do you have but provide the benefits? The genie's out of the bottle, to keep tossing metaphors at you.
Mm.
I mean, you're going to create a bigger problem if you cut everybody off, completely. You're going to create child poverty, et cetera. So, you're between a rock and a hard place. I just say you can't fix it in this generation. It's got to be a multi-generational approach.
Mm.
There's no quick fix.
Yeah.
Mm. Okay, now speak more to the point of it's the problems or the low fatherhood in the black community being due to mass incarceration and the war on drugs.
Well, I'm not going to say that you mean like single parents because you're saying that single motherhood is that mass incarceration is the cause of single motherhood?
Some of the costs, yeah.
Um, I'm a little bit out of my depth here. I think it is a cause. I I mean, that's such a complicated it's such a complicated answer. It is a cause.
Mm. Okay, Wolf, let me hear your thoughts on this.
The same question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Stanley is right about that. It is to an extent single motherhood, but it's also, like I said before, you got to go back to the economics. Why do a lot of, black men between the ages of like 16 to
Yes,
25 turn to the hood? Why do they turn to the streets? Because there's no
right.
jobs for them, there's no infrastructure, and the only way they can make money to put food on the table is to sell drugs. But the problem with that is it harms the community because you get people addicted to crack cocaine and it's a downward spiral and there's no way out of it until proper infrastructure and investment is put into the community, but we can't get that because we're driving down the property values in our neighborhoods by doing this stuff, and then therefore it's destroying the community from the inside out. But it's like they've jammed us into a corner and we can't get out of it because we're hurting ourselves, but they put us so far in the hole that we're trying to climb out, but we just keep pulling more dirt down on top of us.
I mean, in a sense, it's kind of like a a self-propelled engine. I mean, if you're poor and you're out on the streets selling drugs to make money to feed a family, what are you but a a potential a potential prisoner, which is going to create possibly an absentee father. I mean, it's a self-perpetuating, system. It's
Okay,
cascade.
I want to ask this just for the sake of context. Now, I'm believing that the African American community is not the only communities that have poor or disadvantaged people. I also want to believe that other races, there are places where white people are also poor, Asian people are poor, Hispanic people are poor in certain areas. Do you still see these same features that you see in the African American poor communities? Do you see a high rate of crime? Do you see a high rate of single motherhood? Do you see a high rate of incarceration and some of these other things?
Charles, you forgot reservations, Native American reservations, and
Okay.
I don't know that you find the same rates, but I know you find the same problems.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm by no means an expert, but I do know, I made the joke about, a ghetto with fresh air. Um, I'm going out on a limb in saying this, but, from what I understand, um, you know, the Indian reservations, in large part have some of the same problems that inner cities do.
mm.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so now before I open the conversation to every other person as usual, let me just ask this on a broader scale, Stanley, what would you say the right gets wrong? Can you just summarize the list of things that the right gets wrong about African Americans? And that will go for you to Wolf after Stanley.
Well, I really only have one or two things, and I've heard this said, and I can't tell you when or where or who, but I have heard it said that, at least pre-Trump, before Trump, the right, they've been real sporadic with their big tent philosophy, and then someone will come along and say, we're not going to get their vote anyway. So, I think the right tends to be a little over fatalistic about the black vote. And I think sometimes that fatalism leads to lack of creativity. Hey, let's not even put a lot of effort into attracting the black vote. Um, I think that, who I would love to see run for president, and she probably never would. You run Condoleezza Rice for president and see how fast I vote for her.
Is it because she's black?
No, because she's black and competent. I mean, do you know how smart that woman is? I do. I've never met her, but I've read her biography, etc. And you know what? She's right over. She's from Alabama, Montgomery, I think. I mean, she has a background not too different than mine. Um, so what I'm saying is that sometimes I get the feeling that the right is fatalistic and kind of cynical about the black vote, and I think they actually have an opportunity, and I hope they don't squander it. But it also means you might have to deliver something to differentiate yourself from the Democrats, and
Mhm.
that's really it. I mean, that's a lot in and of itself. Try harder.
Hmm.
Okay, so Wolf 95 to you. just summarize, what are the list of those things that you think that the right gets wrong about African Americans?
Well, that's see what the right does, and this is what they do. They try to say, see, well, the Democrats, look how they've been treating y'all, right? And that was Trump's slogan. What do you got to lose because you've been voting one way this long? And he leveraged that, and we took the bait on that, and we put him in, no problems asked. I mean, he got one of the biggest black voter turnouts in 2016, I think, that we had ever seen. And that's the problem. They think, oh, well, we're the lesser of two evils. You know, we ain't really got to do much because the Democrats just destroy them, so they'll vote for us. And that's what I'm saying. They deflect off the problems and blame it on the left. And then the left, they deflect off of it as well. And instead of actually acknowledging it because they don't know what's going on, they're just like, well, see, the right's racist. They put Trump in there. And they kind of like ping pong ball back and forth to each other, almost like who's going to get the vote, you know? And that's why I'm saying that instead of that, they need to actually start telling black people, hey, you know, we're going to help y'all and then deliver, because they're not doing it. Like Trump was a start with the, you know, prison reform and the HBCU funding, but it's not enough. Like, we're tired of this stuff, man. Like, we're tired of y'all taking our vote for granted, treating us like trash, and then coming back in 4 years and asking us to vote for you again. Like, the right has a chance because Joe Biden has pissed off the black community real bad. Now y'all need to
Hey,
leverage that and take advantage in 2024.
you know what would you know
Well,
what would I would love to hear Glenn Lowry go, hey, you know what, black folk? Tell you what, um, why don't you put your vote on the market for real and see who's going to scramble to actually fix some of these problems you may need government help with?
100%.
so Wolf, now tell me what are those things, list of those things you think that the left gets wrong about African Americans. Then Stanley will
Well,
go before
yeah,
Bo
the
comes
one
in.
thing to start is they think that they know the problems in the black community. They think because they pulled up these little, you know, statistic sheets that they know. And that's why I say, you know, sometimes the stats ain't always right. They're not. Because it's what I said earlier. These white liberals, they think they know what's going on, but it's what I said. They would dare come in the hood and talk crazy like they'll do on the cameras, because they no, that would not fly. And they think that they know. They think, well, yeah, black people were oppressed, this and that. That is true to an extent, but in my opinion, they're overachieving. Like they're really trying to like cater to us. Like, yeah, you know, we know y'all are victims, and they're damaging us as well, because there was a story that I don't know if your viewers know him, ain't it? He was talking about this 4-year-old black boy who was in a school, and all these white girls around him said, you know, oh, you can't be racist because you've been oppressed your whole life and this and that. Like, why are you telling this boy this? Like, you're damaging his mentality from a young age. Like, don't tell him he's a victim, but try to like how to, you know, how to do better in school and stuff. Like, don't try to make this kid feel like he's oppressed and his life is destroyed because y'all white liberals is telling him that. Like, y'all don't actually know what's going on. They think they do, but they don't. Because it's like I said, I encourage any one of them to go to the hood, talk crazy like that, and stay there for just a week talking crazy like that.
Okay, Stanley, tell us what you think the left gets wrong about African Americans.
Well, I'm gonna say that, you know, I tend to be left of center, and I would say probably not so much during the Obama administration, but actually, you know, in the 2020 hindsight. I just, you know, I pretty much said it before. The left thinks they've got it made in the shade, to use an old 1950s, you know, um, waspy term. Um, they don't think that they have to fight for the black vote. The last person who did that was Joe Biden, and he needed Clyburn's help. And I'm not sure Clyburn isn't in a excuse me, an elite liberal. You know, I make y'all are going to kill me for saying this, but I make Uncle Tom jokes, but I'm not sure it's the black conservatives that are the real Uncle Toms. We have one in our midst, and I hate to say this, but I think it's Clyburn.
Mm.
So what the left gets wrong is pretty much everything. I can't think of anything they do right. They got Juneteenth. And like I said, I'm left of center. Excuse me. But at the moment, I can't think of much that the left is doing right.
Yeah. All right. Right. Thank you, Stanley. Wolf, do you wanted to say anything else?
No, I mean, he's right about that. Like, it's what I said. They think that they understand black culture, but they don't. They truly don't understand it. They think, because they're out here protesting for us and stuff. But even then, like, look what they did. Like,
Yes.
Black Lives Matter, right? It could have been something great. It could have been.
Yep.
And look what they did. They came in and took it over like hostage and destroyed it. And now look what happened. Every time you hear people on the right, they hear about BLM. What do they think? Terrorist organization. They call it all these names. And it wasn't that when it started, but it became that because of these damn white liberals.
It was colonized.
I disagree.
Okay. Bo, welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, welcome, man. What's going on, Stanley?
Hey, how you doing?
2024. I've said that out of everybody running, period, regardless of just black or whatever, I think Condoleezza was smash 2024 if she came out and ran. Not just because she's a black woman or ADOS or
she's serious. She is seriously smart.
I think probably one of the only few people that got a resume close to hers would probably be Hillary. But
you know what? But
let me just touch on what before I forget my point though. But I think the left get it all right as it relates to they say what do they get wrong about black people or black culture? I think they get it all right from their perspective. You know what I mean? Like they getting black people to vote for them almost 90%. So I think they pretty much got black people down to a science as far as how to get them to support them. You know what I mean?
You make a point.
They have it down to a science how to do justice enough to keep black people. You know what I mean?
I think Joe Biden's going to mess that up, though.
I don't think so. I mean, it's debatable. I think there is a shift. I think there is a shift in some regards, but I don't think it's strong enough to get the majority of black people necessarily go in the opposite direction or opposing.
That's what I'm saying.
There's still that element that there's no other options. You know what I mean?
Hey, Bo, let me ask you a question. Who on the right is going to sense this opportunity and like go hard in the paint to get the Republicans to like do something to attract black voters? I don't see anybody. And, I kind of keep up with politics. I can't think of anyone that's that savvy.
I agree. As far as people that's out there now, yeah, I agree. I think that the next batch will probably try to be like a Trump, like run on that same type of platform, try to recreate Trump's momentum.
And that's a mistake.
And that'll be a mistake. Yeah, I agree.
So, Bo, if I get what you're saying that the left, they are smart and they figured out how to keep black people in their camp, and they should just keep doing what they're doing, and they'll keep having black votes for as long as possible.
Well, for as long as they're useful. If you look, the Latinos pretty much their numbers are growing to the point where, in one or two more elections, the black vote might not even be as relevant to even leverage to get anything from it. Where they have a new dominant base of voters. You got to think, people turn 18 every day. So I think
So they just
I think the direction they're going is to build that Latino base of voters,
Can I ask one quick
where the black
question of
vote
Bub?
won't have the power to really sway an election as much. Go ahead.
Hey, Bo, did you hear about Charles Blow in his
The book,
article?
The Devil You Know.
Book?
The Devil You Know.
Well, he had this thing where he wants everybody to do a reverse Great Migration and move to the South. Did you hear about that?
Right. That the name of the book is The Devil You Know.
Oh, okay,
The Devil
okay.
You Know. Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah, good book. Yeah.
What'd you think? What'd you think of the
great
idea?
Great idea. I 100% agree with him. And to be honest with you, that book changed my whole perception of John Blow, or
Really?
Charles Blow, because I used to look at him as just the basic, liberal CNN talking head, like with the same point of view. But
Right.
yeah, that book changed my perception of him completely.
Wow. Guess I'll have to go get it.
You got to. I would say that's probably a must read for anybody that's ADOS.
Okay.
all right. So we have Chloe and the Black Commander in the house. So Chloe, go ahead, join the conversation. Then Black Commander will go after you.
I've already left, at least left the left, and I haven't necessarily joined a major political party. But I do agree that the left does obviously, in our previous conversations, the left does have a hold on the Black community, and there is a sense of they are at the least looking out for their best interests. But I think that there needs to be consideration of, okay, quote unquote, your heart is in the right place, but can you actually deliver the goods? Can you actually improve a situation? Because there's someone who could believe, like, I'm improving your house. It was like, but you painted it puke green. It doesn't matter if you had good intentions, you made the situation worse. And I think that we need to actually start looking at results instead of just sentiment. I think that people are too swayed by, oh, this person appears to like me, or this group appears to want to do things in my best interest. That's what they say, and they can completely mean it, but people need to have a track record of actually being able to do the job, just like any job interview, right? Someone can truly want to work at Google, right? So many people want to work at Google, but can they do the job? That's what matters.
All right, the Black Commander, my Nigerian brother, welcome to the conversation. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm fine. I'm fine. I just haven't been on YouTube for a while, but I'm back now.
Oh, that's good. It's good to have you. So, did you catch the gist of the conversation, or would you like me to just recap?
From the title, I think I can assume. So you're
Okay.
talking about the left and the right and Black Americans, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So of course I'm not Black American. I'm not here to offend anybody, but to be honest, I don't care if you get offended. I just think that some Black people are holding on to the left way too much. Like last year's election, for example, Biden put almost zero effort into getting the Black vote, and the overwhelming majority of Black people still voted for Biden. So at this point, it's almost like a joke. They have to do nothing to gain Black support. They can say whatever they want, or whatever do nothing that benefits Black people. But as long as they do some kind of post on social media, or they wear the Ghanaian clothes, then suddenly Black people vote for them. So I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, can't take clout.
Yeah, I saw that thing that what's her name? Pelosi and the Democrats did, and
No,
they knelt down and all that. Just
yeah,
it
that
just
was
seemed
all of them.
weird.
That was all. They all did it. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Also, they interviewed Cardi B. I'll say it again, Cardi B. One more time, Cardi B, as a representative of black people. Honestly, I think especially black women should be offended by the audacity to even interview a rapper who was an ex-stripper,
No,
who
but
is a,
Isn't she Dominican?
she's a big artist. She's influential.
she is. I'm not sure. I think she might be. I don't really know, to be
I
honest.
mean, she's not even. Is she even a descendant of a slave?
I
Well,
don't
she's
know.
from the Dominican Republic, probably.
Yeah, but I mean, they were Spanish. They were Spanish. The Spanish had slavery there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he right. You know, Michelle Obama came out and saying that. No, not Michelle Obama. I think it was Maxine Waters saying that Megan Thee Stallion it should be an inspiration for all black women, and she's so proud to make this whole theatrical like. Yeah, it gets weird on the
Leah,
left.
let me peel my skin off right now, just with the cringe.
So, just a question, right? So, I'm assuming that Chloe, Botep, and Stanley are Black Americans.
Yeah,
Right.
No,
everyone here is black.
Okay, no, I'm just wondering because usually, I don't like to talk about this stuff without Black Americans being there themselves, you know. So,
yeah,
Right.
we
No.
can hear
yeah.
you.
Yeah. So but Charlemagne the God. I wouldn't call him the God. Charlemagne. He interviewed Joe Biden as well. I think that was where he talked about not being black. So it wasn't just Cardi B. There was some
hmm
other person.
Yeah. If you don't
But
vote for me, you're not black.
Yeah.
Well,
um,
Charlemagne is semi-legit. Semi-legit. He's a radio host, so I mean, he would be someone that Biden would want to sit down and talk with. I mean, Cardi B,
He
I don't understand
interviews.
that.
He
but
interviews
see
rappers.
in the interview, Biden had the audacity to say that if you don't vote for him, you're not black. This
Oh,
is
it was played over and over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a presidential candidate who doesn't feel any need to at least be politically correct in like this political correct
Well,
era. So,
you
you know,
you might have missed my comment that had he been running in any other circumstances and against almost any other running against any other Republican, that would have been the moment that he lost the black vote and thus the election.
Yeah.
The only reason he won is Trump was his opponent.
And there is also the
Right.
fact of we don't know where Joe Biden or when Joe Biden believes he is as well. I mean, I
Yeah.
He's
can't really
perfectly
take.
Well,
he's
Stanley.
as cognizant as a man his age can be.
I mean,
But
Stanley.
the
Not even
Stanley point though,
Charlemagne. Like, what about Ice Cube? Ice Cube was another one that was trying to be like, yo, I'm not fucking with either side. I'm just trying to get something done.
You know what? I don't know what to think about Ice Cube. That was
but
I don't know
also
what to think. I
Well,
don't know what to think.
well, I mean,
I find it interesting how Chloe, go first. I'll go after you.
well, I guess so. I mean, like, so if like in terms of representation of the black community, I mean, so we had what Megan Thee Stallion, Charlemagne the God, a podcaster. I mean, like, they couldn't get Oprah, right? I mean, it's just like, is that the best that they could
Well,
get?
this is going to be a slight aside, but kind of on the topic. And it kind of goes back to something Glenn Lowry says. I can agree with Lowry to the extent that it is a real shame that the only non-entertainer, well, I won't even go there. We don't have anyone other than an entertainer, an athlete, or Oprah, who I guess is a media personality.
Well, like there's like Colonel.
Where are the engineers? Well, Ben Carson, but
Well,
he's for the other side.
there is Neil deGrasse Tyson. There's Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Well, yeah, I guess he counts.
But I mean, so I think here's the thing, right? I think it's intentional that they picked entertainers because that also speaks to what they think would hook the Black community. Are entertainers? They don't believe
exactly. Yeah,
they don't like, because we do have Neil deGrasse Tyson, we do have intellectuals, we do have, but they see like, well, those people don't have Instagram followers. I mean, even currently, the White House, outside of race, they're trying to use people, TikTokers, teenage TikTokers, to to promote vaccination. It's like they're kind of looking towards the lowest common denominator in order to spread their message. And I think they're completely disinterested in people who actually have complex ideas and complex things to say.
That's very good marketing. They are doing an excellent job with marketing their ideas. They are keeping up with the times. That's a plus for the Democrats.
That goes back to Bo's point. Maybe they're smarter than I'm giving them credit for.
And I mean, I think in general, like that's a discussion even outside of race, that people are talking about, like, they would love to have a very, very smart, a very, a president that has a huge intellectual prowess. But, at the end of the day, who gets voted in is, oh, who do you want to have a beer with? So like there is something to, marketability and charisma, and people who can see themselves hanging out with their people who like those types of figures.
Well,
and
I see your point, Chloe, but also I do think there's, like, okay, using teenagers to promote things on TikTok and social media, that's different than having an election and bringing Cardi B to represent the average Black person or Black voter. I don't know. It just seems like
yeah,
a
it
new
is
level
insulting.
of disrespect. Yeah, disrespect and insulting. It's almost like that's how they see Black people. To be honest with you.
One thing to keep in mind, though, Trump pulled in more Black votes this time around than he did in 2016. So bear that in mind. There were some people who probably were pissed off at Joe Biden's comment.
Yeah, and there is also the fact. So you named the HBCU and funding, the prison reform, but also, like, Trump, like, well, at least before COVID, unemployment was pretty low, which automatically he did kind of deliver on his promise to reducing unemployment for Black community.
Then he went and blew it all up with incompetence.
Yeah, that's what I said, before COVID.
So I mean, does that really count?
But I don't think we were ahead on Trump. I don't think you could put
it until the last 5 minutes of the game. Then we lost.
But still, COVID is a curveball that was thrown all over the world.
A curveball that he couldn't hit. A
curveball that most countries couldn't hit.
I wouldn't put COVID on Trump. It was his undoing. It was his undoing during this election, but I wouldn't put it on him.
Well, you're arguing against American exceptionalism. If we were like most countries and couldn't handle it, then there goes the exceptionalism.
Well, I mean,
who handled it? Which country handled it? There was basically no, aside China, who we cannot really trust their data. Who handled the COVID very well?
The only country that I
New
think
Zealand did, but they're really small.
They're very smart. But Sweden took a very, very different approach. That it is mixed as to if that was successful or not. I'm kind of thinking they had a different cost benefit analysis that they chose that they could live with the long term. I mean, so they made a risk and they stuck with it instead of kind of the options that a lot of other first world countries did, which was be so risk averse that they kind of made things worse. Like lockdowns, didn't really help in terms of the fact that obesity makes the consequences of COVID worse. So therefore, forcing people to stay in their homes, gaining weight doesn't make it better. But anyway, it's
Well,
COVID's issues.
the one advantage that Sweden and a lot of countries had, and I don't know where I read this, but I think it's maybe more countries that are homogeneous as far as population tend to be able to pull in one direction easier than a country like America, where there are a lot of different subpopulations. Plus, getting Americans outside of a war or a terrorist attack, getting Americans pulling in one direction is like herding cats.
Right,
it's hard to do.
But the Sweden decision, it wasn't necessarily hurting cats. It was like, we're just going to keep things open. I mean, you didn't have to even get everyone on board. If people wanted to stay home and lock down, they had that choice. But if they wanted to go to a shop, if they wanted to keep their shop open, if they wanted to, so basically they didn't need to herd cats in that sense. They said like, hey, do what you want. We're just going to lock down the nursing homes. We're going to lock down the vulnerable populations, which is a lot easier to do than locking down everyone, irregardless of your risk factors.
But they did pay a price, right?
Probably, but I think they chose that price. That's the thing, is like, we are making decisions, and how the decisions are sold here in America is like, we have to do this or else, and assuming that like, if we're going to do this and we're going to have no consequences. And I think that's where we went wrong, is that we're selling options. Like the CDC are pushing these mandates saying, if we do this, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. There are no risks to our decision or to this policy, but there are risks. And the fact that they're not admitting that there are risks erodes the public's trust in them, when in the case of Sweden, they can totally admit this has a risk, but we're weighing this against this other risk. And as long as you're honest about the possible outcomes, I think that maintains social trust in the government, as long as they're being honest. And I think that and again, in America, especially after 2016, the trust in public institutions just has been taking a nosedive for a really long time.
Yeah, well, having a president as wacky as Trump was didn't help matters. Whether you went one direction or you went another direction, go in one direction is my point. And Trump sometimes could be a little erratic.
Yeah, and I think that is true. But there is also the fact of if you got different levels of his personality based off of the media that you saw, right? So I mean, so like, of course, if you're just listening to liberal stuff, you're hearing, oh my gosh, he is completely unhinged.
I watched Trump. I mean, I took every opportunity I could to watch Trump live. Why the media is a whole lot less entertaining than Trump live.
Yeah, but then I think, and of course, if you listen to the right, they say all these good things. Because I remember when when he won, I was in an office that was mostly conservative, and so they're talking about all this stuff about Trump, and then I had read something about like him trying to get Jared Kushner a security clearance, and then I had to mention, I was like, "But that's hinky, right, guys?" And they had never heard of it. So I mean, that's how, like, it's yeah, both sides are like, you do realize that there are valid things to criticize him on, because the right was spoiled on any criticism or valid criticism of Trump, because most of the left was just filling it with all these stupid things. They kept mentioning his Twitter account, and it's like, it's kind of like, the boy who cried wolf. Like, the moment you actually come across a valid criticism, everyone's going to completely disregard it. And that's why I think the media on both sides spoils the argument. It just spoils it all over. You can't really have any proper discourse or, bring up arguments in good faith, because it's just all drowned out by all this noise. But then there's also, like, there's one thing of where I saw where it's like, oh, I guess he's not as crazy as maybe I had thought he was, because I think during VidCon there was like, of course, VidCon is mostly liberal, and so but then Trump had like this collection of all of these conservative YouTubers and in the White House, and they had this press conference. But like even Trump, he said like, I don't know about some of these people here, right? So I'm like, wait, even Trump thinks that Chowder is like too extreme. What is happening? Like,
Well,
I don't know. It's weird.
I wouldn't call Steven Crowder extreme unless you're just I won't go there.
Or maybe he was talking about Alex Jones, because that guy is extreme. Like he's nuts.
Well, no, I have no use for Steven Crowder, but extreme, I don't know. Extreme isn't how I would describe him. It would be another pejorative.
Yeah, I don't watch any of these pundits like
See, I do.
But
I'm kind of a political junkie, so I watch all these programs.
yeah, I admittedly I don't pay hard and fast attention to stuff. I like participating in conversations more. There was a time where I did watch like MSNBC and that a lot more religiously, but I like my mental health.
I'm with you, Chloe.
So I mean, like I realized that I prefer getting my information from kind of like just kind of more holistic stories of like listening to a podcast series about bees. There's a lot that I like, or just very, very specific things of like, you know, like an economics podcast that would talk about the industry of electric cars or something like that. And I find that for using that as the basis to form my opinion about the world, when I actually do hear a political opinion that mentioned these things, that's when, you know, my senses go up like, wait, that's not right. Like you actually haven't listened to, you don't actually know enough facts about this situation. You're just saying the popular thing. And that is what is mostly causing me to distrust a lot of political rhetoric about like these sweeping like solutions or these sweeping policies or programs, because if you can't even tell the truth, or if you haven't even thought to find out what the truth is when you're constructing something that's supposed to help a lot of people or supposed to improve Americans' lives, I don't trust you.
Welcome, Manan.
I had a question for everyone. Is this a question about the left and right in the U.S. only?
I mean, that's the only political, like, you know, dichotomy that I know. I'm not as aware of the left and right in other parts of the world. And of course, like what most people say is like the rest of the world. Well, like that's something that the liberals say a lot, right? Oh, like a conservative in another country is left here, but I don't think that's actually true.
Okay, next question.
I don't call it news anymore. I call it opinions.
Next question. How do the left and right treat Black Americans and or immigrant Black Americans, I don't know what you're going to call that, differently than they treat other people, like Latinos, for example?
I would say they ignore them.
Well, Anand, didn't you say that, excuse me, Latinos are considered white? So, I mean, I imagine they're part of the 60%.
Well, so I think 70% of Latino has nothing to do with ancestry. It's a cultural marker. So 70% of Latinos are also white, but but they're still Latino. And actually, there are a lot of Black Latinos too, and there are other Latinos.
Yeah,
Asian Latinos,
yeah. Like, yeah, there's like, but because of Mexico, when people think of Latino, they think of Mexican, and they think a lot of people think specifically of, you know, that as a race, or when they're really mestizos. But then I guess it also, America is so large, depending on where you are in the country. When you hear Latino, like if you're in Florida, you think of Cuban, right? And if you're in Mexico, if you're in Texas, you think of Mexican. Yeah, those are the two big ones. But and then if you're
If
you're
you're in
like
New York, it's Puerto Rican.
exactly. And because of all those places also had slavery, you're not guaranteed of what color a person who says like they're Latino and when they walk through the door what color they're going to be or what features they're going to have. You know, when I spent time in I think Northeast Heights in New York, you know, it was kind of the first time I ever went to a neighborhood where everyone kind of looked like me, and therefore I was terrified for someone to speak to me because I don't speak Spanish, but everyone thinks I do. um, but yeah, it's you know, yeah, there are white Latinos, but you know, if they pass as white, then people just think they're white.
Well, no, not anymore, because now they're calling themselves Latino. It depends. It's code switching. It's all code switching. It's whatever beneficial to a specific circumstance. So everyone constantly switching all over the place. But they also want some protection from that they can get from Latinos, some of them, but it's not a real. I think it's a,
But they also want
people.
some protection
Hold on,
from-
I'm gonna. There's a problem here. Okay, I think it's a fake category for the most part. So my question is, how are blacks treated differently than non-blacks? Whether it's Latinos, Asians, mixed, Native Americans.
You mean in terms of immigrants?
Well, in terms of the left and the right, the question of this, because we're talking about what they get wrong about Black Americans, but what how do they get things wrong with Black Americans that they don't get wrong with Latinos and mixed and others and Native Americans
And you're talking about the left, right?
and the right, both?
Well, I mean, so the thing is that it depends on like the demographic. Like, so I would think like wasn't it true that like a huge chunk of Cuban Americans vote Republican? You know, they're more conservative, and I think that that's probably going to be the case with the Venezuelan diaspora. Because sometimes, like half the time, if I see, sometimes I see on YouTube, some videos of like a Cuban American going into a American grocery store and they're weeping, they're crying because this is like the greatest thing that they have ever seen. And so when they see like someone like on the left, like Bernie Sanders advocating for socialist policies, they're going to be immediately turned off because it seems like the left is kind of battling on, who can appear to be more progressive, whether or not they actually are more progressive. And I think that for some immigrant populations, that's going to cause them to run away immediately in the opposite direction. So I think it might be more finely grained than just Latinos, Asians, because I think it might even get down to the specific ethnic groups or people who are from a different nationality, as to if they're going to be considered like a friend or a foe, according to whatever political party you're talking about.
Okay.
Yes, so that's from their own point of view. Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, so there was a point that Wolf made that I think is worth highlighting. He said basically news stations, either on the left or the right, that they're just basically opinion pieces, and I agree with that. When I started following Western media much more rigorously, I just noticed that this was not news. This was just basically opinions couched as news. Where you go to channels like Fox News, you're going to see the narrative is going to be shaped on a particular direction. If you go to CNN, it's going to be shaped in the other particular direction. So it just seemed like nobody was willing to tell you the news. Nobody was willing to tell you facts. They were just going to couch their opinion and spread it out as if it's news. And it was very off-putting for me because the idea that I used to have of Western media was that I thought Western media was objective, and basically that was CNN. It was CNN and BBC that we're very used to.
Hey, Charles.
Yeah.
The one thing you have to be careful of with cable news, though, after about maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, it is all opinion. If you want straight news, you get a better chance of it around, say midday to maybe 4 p.m. Eastern time. You're more likely to get straight news in those hours. Once you start getting into prime time, it is like Fox News is called Fox News, but their prime time from about 6 to whenever, 11 or whenever the last show is, that's all opinion.
Yeah, it's literally categorized as opinion if you actually look at and the same thing with like MSNBC, right?
Exactly.
It's all like Rachel Maddow. She doesn't report on the news.
That's opinion.
It's her opinion. She
No. I'm not even talking about those shows where you know that these are opinion pieces. I'm talking about them shaping, because they might tell you the news, but then they will have pundits there that would, give a certain narrative, that will give a certain drive. Just for example, when Trump was in the office, they're going to read the news. You might even see the headlines on something like this. But right there, they will be analyzing the news while they're reading the news, and it will be obvious that they have a narrative, they have an agenda that they're pushing. So even aside the one that that, okay, these are opinion pieces, at least those ones are understandable. But the news itself is obviously biased in terms of coverage and in terms of their analysis of it.
Well, Charles, look at it. What's the two biggest news networks in America? Fox and CNN. CNN is liberal, Fox is conservative. And what do? They try to rile their base up, and they don't tell news. Like, they give opinions on something based off what they see.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's good for your side or not, dude, tell the truth, man. Don't lie about it and try to piss people off.
It's confirmation bias. They're selling confirmation bias.
Oddly enough, probably the best news you'll get will be Al Jazeera. At least when I used to watch that sort of stuff on TV, Al Jazeera was actually pretty good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I felt sorry when Al Jazeera America was leaving. As in, I felt bad when Al Jazeera America. I think where did they leave? Is it that they left the US or they left cable? I know there was a time Al Jazeera had to leave somewhere, but I really enjoyed their news.
Yeah.
Like, Stanley, you're right, man. Like, the one thing about Trump that I thought it was hilarious when this dude get on TV, fake news media. This media is the worst problem we got in this country. I can't say the man was lying when he said that.
Well, but he used them like, now the one thing Trump is a master at, and that is media manipulation. I mean, ever since he was the game show dude, and he owned the beauty pageant and all that stuff, he knows how to work the news.
Oh yeah.
When he ran in 2016, didn't he like spend the least on media? They were paying him for interviews.
Yeah. I mean, he made them a lot of money, man. I mean, I think ever since, like, the media is just not what it used to be. Now it's like, I mean, I saw a headline the other day talking about Joe Biden's favorite ice cream. I'm like, who gives a fuck?
Well, in their defense, I remember back in the Reagan days, I know Reagan liked jelly beans and Bush Sr. liked pork skins. So you would get stories like that, 30 years ago. But, they were, quote, human interest stories.
Yeah. I think somehow that Trump has broken the media, at least the traditional media in America, because he was an addiction. He was an addiction for both the right and the left while he was in power. And immediately he's left that place, the media just falls flat. That social media and other alternative sources of news might become much more relevant going forward than the traditional media.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, my bad, Stan. Go ahead. Now, I was just saying real quick, like, take a look at Trump, right? Like, he trashed on CNN, MSNBC, ABC. He worshiped Fox. But the moment Fox called him out, now, I don't rock with them no more. That's that media manipulation we're talking about. The moment he gets exposed, I don't rock with them no more. They're fake news now. Why? Because they called you out. So yeah.
So,
Go
question
ahead.
for you: are you guys saying that news is the problem? It's not the left or the right that's getting things wrong with Black
The news is
Americans.
the biggest
The
problem
news is
because
the
they
problem.
fuel the
Media.
flames. They
Okay.
fuel the flames with this
You
bullshit.
know what? I think news is the problem only to the extent that they need money.
Yep.
I mean, they need ad dollars, they need eyes on them. And I mean, they're basically performers, you know. That's just the way the market works, I guess. I mean,
agree
I
with
think
that.
things started going south when they started having 24-hour news cycles.
Exactly.
You've got to basically make news to stay in business.
It's entertainment. It's entertainment now.
Exactly.
But people want to believe that they're being more intellectual because I'm learning about the world, but they're just getting their confirmation bias while feeling high and mighty about themselves.
You're learning about the world, all right. Hey, I got a question for everybody. I was just sitting here thinking about it. I really wish God, I'm going to get what I wish for. I wish they would let Trump back on Twitter. Maybe I'm a Twitter now.
You're that bored?
Well, no, I just wonder what it would be like.
I don't know. I think Twitter is trash. It brings out the worst in absolutely everyone.
Oh my god, dude! Twitter is like a war zone.
The thing is that I've never even understood Twitter. I have a Twitter account, but I don't use it. And even now with the Twitter ban in my country, it doesn't even affect me. It doesn't even look as if there was something like Twitter. But even with before the ban, I just didn't get the hang of that app. So I don't know.
But Twitter is one of the only news sources available in many, many places. For example, in Afghanistan every day, if you want to know what's happening, what's the latest mosque that blew up, because daily, like a mosque is blowing up, a lot of people are getting assassinated. Twitter is the only place to find out. Otherwise, you can't find out.
Well, so I definitely remember when Twitter kind of gained its kudos was like during the Arab Spring, and then that's when people like, oh, Twitter is actually useful. Yes, it's useful in those countries, not in America. It's a net it's a net negative in America. So in terms of public discourse, for I think probably I would guess first world countries, it's not good. But in places where they need decentralized, I mean, from their perspective, decentralized communication, yeah, it's probably very good for them. And also, they have real problems, not like, I don't know. They got my order wrong at Sonic, and I'm real mad. I don't know.
Well, and something else too, and then to answer your question about the left, this bullshit cancel culture, like deleting all this bullshit, reporting people, getting people banned. Like if these people are dumb enough to post it, let them post it, expose themselves. Don't sit there and get triggered because somebody said something you disagree with.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. Well, like
a prime example, I got banned on Twitter because I said Muslims are under attack, genuine Muslims, and they fucking banned me for hate speech.
What?
Just because you put Muslims on attack, that's it. They did not even.
But so I have a kind of like a weird example. So I know someone who, to this day, up and down, he will claim that he was banned from Twitter because he was fighting against Nazis and he was fighting against racists, right? But I saw what he actually was posting, and what he posted was that he wished that Mitch McConnell's grandkids would die of COVID, right? And so he got banned, right?
Bro, what the fuck?
Yeah, wonder why.
Yeah, and he got banned, and so now every single time he makes a Twitter account, he can get banned again for ban evasion, right? But it only emboldens him, like, oh, Twitter's a place for racists because they banned me for fighting against racists. No, you wish that children died. That's what happened. And it just brings out the
Oh
worst in
man.
people, and he will never hold himself accountable for like, no, I saw you say something messed up. I don't have a Twitter account. Sometimes I just log in just to see what crazy stuff he says. I saw it before he got banned. So like, and so he might have got banned for something worse, but that was the worst that I saw from him. And even for me, like I think that's it. Like that would be enough for me.
Another question for all of you. So from what I'm hearing, it's not just the left and the right that gets things wrong about Black Americans. It's also social media, the news. What else gets things wrong? Academia, does it get things wrong?
Probably academia too. I mean, it's just like, so you know, I listen to someone do. He does a lot of interviews with a lot of wide ranging topics. But so he interviewed like a New York, you know, a former New York teacher, right? And you know, like, and in New York City, you know, like how they're kind of try to like get rid of tests and reevaluate how they evaluate students, and they're hoping because you know they want to, you know, not have the test scores of Black kids look so bad, just kind of get rid of that data point by not grading it anymore, and that's not gonna do well. But I think it's just, I think the problem is that everyone is going for the lowest fruit, right? They're going to do what can they do that's the least effort, but they can make it appear to be the most substantive thing that they can do when they're fighting or they're doing something important. But you know, they're just trying to get clicks, they're just trying to get their kudos, they're just trying to make it look like they're improving their metrics.
They're hoping Black people confuse effort with results.
Exactly. And it's just like, I don't know, some people I see them doing the most, and sometimes I'm like, why? Like, you know, this is not going to do anything. But it's sometimes it's like theatrics. I remember, you know, like when I had more friends on the left, right? And it was around the time where, you know, Black Lives Matter was kind of, you know, coming up, and I think like there was another like video camera, like a video of someone getting shot or something like that, or there was a slideshow. Great, thank you. Now I can see a slideshow of all these people getting shot. Do you think that's what you want me to see? But there are all these people who are just like, I don't know, like kind of visual, like, you know, they're the textual form of crying in a Facebook post about all these things. And it's like, I don't see any Black people expending that much emotion about this. It's as if like, you know, if you broke your leg, but your friend is wailing and crying more than you're like, what is the purpose of this?
Yeah, in Africa, we say he's crying more than the bereaved. I don't know if that's this thing that's common in the West. Or you're taking medicine for someone else's ailment.
And I had another question. So you brought up something interesting, Chloe. Is part of the reason that there's a lack of understanding about Black Americans on the left, on the right, on academia, in the media, in social media? Is it because there are certain elephants in the room no one wants to talk about, one of which is differential education outcomes, and the other is differential crime outcomes, and how these spreads have been growing over time?
Well, I'm gonna harken back to something I wrote to Charles earlier. It's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it. Okay. Amy Wax, is everyone familiar with Amy Wax?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay,
I've heard
well,
the name, but yeah.
she is one of these people who she was on Louis Razzo's show not too long ago. She's one of these people who calls herself a Western chauvinist, and she has literally said that Black people, you know, really need to get used to being underrepresented in certain fields. In essence, Black people really need to pull themselves up and wait their turn while they're pulling things up, getting themselves together. Well, besides the 1920s attitude, she just tends to be an unpleasant person. And when she says stuff like that, it comes across as less, it comes across just rubbing people the wrong way. I contrast her with someone like Charles Murray, who essentially says the same thing, but he's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to hear that from Charles Murray than it is from Amy Wax.
Is part of the problem that Amy Wax comes from a traditional Jewish background?
That really doesn't matter. Background doesn't matter. It's the delivery that matters.
In the way she grew up, children and nephews and nieces are put under enormous pressure to academically.
That's not my problem.
No, I get that, but she's treating blacks the way she treats her own son or grandson or nephew.
That is not anybody else's problem. She comes across like she comes across. You know what? She's not going to give me an excuse if I wind up at the bottom of her law class. So I'm not going to give her an excuse for coming across abrasive.
Oh, right.
That's what it is, Stanley. They like to dish it out, but they can't take it when the shit comes back. Right?
Exactly. And that's what they get wrong about black people, because you meet the right black person who, you know what? I was educated in an all-boys Catholic military school. I was the only black in my class for 3 of the 4 years I was there. I know how white people are trained. I've been called the N-word a few times in jest. So I know how to handle myself around white people, and I'm sure as shit not afraid of them, because I know bigger words than most of them. So I don't give a shit about Amy Wax and how she was raised. Now there's my passion, just like Glenn Lowry.
Well, another prime example too, Stanley. There was this video going around. This white girl was talking shit on these white girls, calling them skanks and bitches and hoes. I'm quoting her here. And then when the white girl came back and called her a porch monkey, now she gets offended, triggered, crying on TikTok. And I'm just like, what did you expect, sweetheart? You kept calling them all these names. Don't expect them to just take that shit from you.
If you're going to dish it, you better be able to take it. Because there's, like my father used to say, no matter how good you get at something, there's always going to be somebody better.
Yeah.
All right. I think I broke off a bit just now, so I want us to end the conversation here. It's 2 hours already, so thank you guys very much for coming. So just one sentence from you, Wolf, and then Chloe, Stanley, then we're done.
Still there?
Yeah. So, Wolf, what would you say? Just summarize for us your last points and about the topic.
I don't really have a last point. I just think that, politicians, I don't know what to say. They've just gotten away with so much. I mean, I think black people are between a rock and a hard place. It's jokers to the left of you. How does the song go? Jokers to the right of me, something to the left of me. Where do you go?
All right.
Yeah, sorry about that. My Wi-Fi reset. I don't know why I did that.
No problem. So, what's your last statement? This topic for today.
I mean, I would say it's interesting to meet people like Stanley, because Stanley's the first black man I've met, that kind of, he's centrist, but he leans more left. Is that correct? Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, but I mean, there's plenty on the right that I go along with. I mean, my parents, my parents are conservative, but you know what my father asked me? He was like ringing my phone off the hook to make sure that I got out to vote for Biden. and he's pretty conservative.
Yeah. Like that's the thing about I like about Stanley, because to answer your question, Charles, a lot of us don't like to talk about what goes on in the community. We like to just, pretend like that don't exist and blame it on the, the white man and the system. But I'm not saying it's solely on us. It's not, but it's important that we understand accountability where it needs to be due.
Exactly.
I mean, because as I told you before, I should not feel threatened being around my people, walking down the street, not knowing if somebody gonna look at me the wrong way or get a wrong intention of me and try to pull a gun and take me out. I shouldn't have to feel like that.
All right, Chloe.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of problems, and it's just a lot of problems on both sides. And I think it's there is a general othering of they have this idea of what Black Americans care about, and there's like this interesting projection of that they're fundamentally different. They have fundamentally different concerns or interests, and it's very obvious, like how they thought that Cardi B was, I'm supposed to feel super proud and represented by Cardi B. But ultimately, I think that the best way to kind of break this cycle is, people in Black communities need to put their vote on the market, not take this shit, and just actually care about the results and vote for or vote for results, pay attention to results, and kind of ignore all of this circus. Essentially, it's all a circus. That yeah, you get you eat your popcorn. Someone may point you out in the crowd and like, oh, I feel special for a second, but at the end of the day, you're gonna leave the circus tent and you might smell some elephant manure, and that's gonna be your night. It's not gonna change anything.
All right, thank you very much, guys, for this conversation. So definitely there are some things that the right gets wrong about African Americans, and also some things that the left gets wrong about African Americans. And we have been able to cover some of those things today. And I hope that maybe both sides will make some adjustments and do things that are for the benefit of the African American community, and we would all be better for it. So thank you guys for coming again. Until next time, remain awesome, and I'll catch you in another live stream. So good night, guys.
Good night.
See you.
Night.